Sometimes you do interrupt your client, and that is when direct communication comes into play. And this is something to do artfully and skillfully, and is very distinct from interrupting a client when the coach is just feeling like they can't hold something back. They've got to say something. That instinct, that desire from a coach needs to be completely set aside. And that's why I do say early on in coach training and practicing coaching, you need to try to just completely quit any efforts towards expressing yourself by interrupting the client. However, there are exceptions to that general rule, which the ICF highlights as part of the direct communication competency and the markers of success there. And one of the main ways we make sure to interrupt properly is we make sure there's a coach-specific reason for the interruption. One of the best examples of this is when a client is getting a little bit too much into the details of a story and the background that has led them to this point. So if you look at the idea of building trust and intimacy and building the coaching relationship, the third marker of success there is that the coach allows the client to fully express themselves. This isn't saying, though, that the coach is allowing the client to fully express their frustration at another individual and what that individual has done. It's not the coach is allowing the client to express those other people's selves. It's that the coach is allowing the spotlight to be on the client so the client is able to process things in a way that moves them forward. And if client is spending a lot of the coaching session venting and replaying the story and sharing these details that don't really matter to the coaching, that's where the energy gets sucked down, the momentum goes down, and over time, the relationship of the coaching actually is harmed. And it truly might feel like the right thing to allow the client to express the situation, to go into storytelling. But if we have set the agenda, the agreement for the session, or first the agreement for the overall relationship, and then the agreement for this agenda or this session, and then through this coaching session, they get into a moment of storytelling. There's a critical moment there where maybe let's say this has gone on for about 30 seconds of them telling a story, telling about what other people have done. The coach has an option. They can allow this client to continue another minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. Or the coach can jump in and interrupt. Hey, client, let me interrupt you real briefly. And then you go in with what their agenda was, asking them questions about what's at the heart of what you're trying to express. What did you most gain or feel, experience? What were the biggest emotions you had during this story that you're telling me? What was your biggest takeaway from the story? What's the biggest challenge from the story? If a coach doesn't go there, if the coach chooses to allow the client to just keep talking and talking and talking, then we realize, and the client realizes over time, and this client's paid good money or at least paid good time, if their company is paying for the coaching, to just say what's already happened, to go through the details. And it's almost like a junk food session, a junk food coaching session. It feels really good, and then you get a tummy ache afterwards. It doesn't do you any good in the long run to only vent. In this moment, the coach's best option is going to be to jump in, say, hey, client, early in this session, you said this is the outcome you wanted to work on. And I know there's a lot to share with the story, and I appreciate you being willing to be vulnerable and sharing the details and how you felt. But I want to challenge you here. What do you most want to get out of the rest of our session as we look at what happens now as a result of the story? Like, this is a redirecting, but it is not the coach taking control of the session. It is allowing the client who set the agenda at the beginning, set the agreement at the beginning, for that client to help direct the coaching back onto the right path. So take that time, be willing to interrupt in that type of moment. Anytime you'd like to interrupt because you have a sense of what should come next, or you have this really cool question or observation, set that aside. But there are these moments where it is right to interrupt the story and the gossip for the sake of the client. Hope this is helpful. I mean, if there's ever something you need feedback on, make sure to offer some recordings to a mentor coach around this thing of interrupting a client. Ask for feedback around it if you've offered an interruption in a session, to hear what it looked like from the outside. Did it feel like a coaching interruption, or did it feel like the coach was just inserting themselves when they shouldn't have? We need to hear that kind of feedback as coaches, because it's hard to feel it on our side in the midst of a session.